30 years after its construction, the Columbia Point Housing Project in Boston, Massachusetts had become a symbol of the failure of public housing in America. A nightmarish zone of poverty, crime, and despair.
Nobody cared anything about Columbia Point. Nobody did anything about Columbia Point. You know, it was just a matter of you exist on your own or you don't exist at all. Okay.
You were scared to death to have a fire in the house or for anybody to get sick. The fire department and the ambulance would stop down at the Bank of Boston and wait for a police escort to come in. It was very depressing to live here. People here were prisoners in their own homes or either prisoners in their own neighborhoods.
I want a drum roll.
It was time to show that all people of Boston and the Commonwealth, whether black, white, or Spanish, in all income groups, could live together in a new neighborhood as equals.
This is the story of a unique partnership between a tenacious group of low-income tenants and an unusual real estate development team who joined forces to make their common dream a reality.
The tenants are going to have a full 50% say in every policy that goes on.
These guys are crazy. They will never do that here in Columbia Point.
It will happen. It is going to happen very shortly.
And it's the story of an American dream, the transformation of one of the worst public housing projects in the nation into a model mixed-income community. Built on an isolated peninsula in Boston Harbor, the Columbia Point Housing Project opened its doors in 1954. With its 1,500 units, it was not only the largest public housing project in Boston, but ranked among the biggest nationwide. For the city of Boston, Columbia Point was a symbol of pride. This new project would house hundreds of families who were badly in need of housing. But by the mid-1970s, Columbia Point looked almost like a ghost town. Over 2/3 of the apartments lay vacant. Crime and drugs ran rampant. What was once a source of pride for the city was now a national disgrace. For the 300 families who continued to live at Columbia Point, life became more isolated and frightening every day.
Then the heat. The cold days, you don't have heat. Hot days, you burn up. That's right.
With no formal role in the project's management, residents were virtually helpless to turn things around. Yet the heart of this story is that they never stopped trying. For more than 20 years, a core group of tenants known as the Columbia Point Community Task Force struggled to change the project's decaying conditions. In the past, the project had received monies to be used for modernization, but the tenants quickly realized that making minor improvements to buildings was not getting at the heart of the problem. So when monies once again became available, the tenants lobbied for a more comprehensive approach. They now wanted to use the funds as seed money to redevelop Columbia Point. Joining forces with the city of Boston, the tenants set out to find a developer.
The developer didn't come to us and say, hey, here we are. We're going to redevelop Columbia Point, and you will have a nice new unit to live in, and all you have to do is abide by the rules and guidelines, and that's it. I said, no way. We got the developers get together according to what we wanted, what our needs was, and what we saw was the way to go to have it redeveloped.
What they wanted was an economically and racially mixed community that would guarantee housing for the existing Columbia Point residents. They also wanted tenant participation in the planning and operation of the new development. Following a national competition, 2 locally based development teams were designated as finalists. Eventually, these 2 teams were merged to form Peninsula Partners. The Columbia Point Community Task Force would be a general partner, and the team would be led by the firm of Corcoran Mullins Jennison, known as CMJ.
If you were to take and clear that site and just build a new development, every developer in the country would be jumping out of their skins to try to do it. But the challenge here is to take an existing resident population, work together as partners, form the partnership, and work together to build something, a new community.
The new community would be called Harbor Point, offering 1,300 units of mixed-income rental housing to the Boston market. The plan was to keep over half the existing buildings by rehabbing them into family units. It also called for new construction of mid-rises and townhouses. The design of Harbor Point would include facilities for recreation, daycare, and a new health center. With a price tag in excess of $200 million, the physical transformation of Columbia Point would be an enormous undertaking. Due to federal cutbacks in housing programs, the partnership turned to the state for help. Under the leadership of the Executive Office of Communities and Development, the Massachusetts Housing Finance Agency, the City of Boston, and the Boston Housing Authority, a complex package of federal, state, and private financing was carefully structured.
One of the most exciting development projects in the history of the city of Boston. A lot of people worked very hard for this, too. A lot of years of frustration.
The development process would involve the close working cooperation of the city and state agencies, the private developers, and the current Columbia Point residents. This public-private partnership combined the development expertise and financial strength of the private sector with the public agency's commitment to low-income residents.
Exactly right.
When you heard once again that they were going to actually take this place and change it, did you believe it that time?
No, I didn't. Because they said it so many times. Every year, they would say it was going to happen. But it never did.
There were so many rumors and stories and things that everybody was going to get put out. They wanted you to move. They don't want you here. They just want, you know, high-income people, not low rent.
These rumors and doubts attracted the attention of the media.
We have two guests on the future of Columbia Point. Developer Joseph Corcoran has been planning that future for years now. Dorothy Harris has been living through Columbia Point's present and worries whether she and others there are included in that future. Ms. Harris, let me begin with you. This all sounds pretty wonderful. Why are you not persuaded?
I think I'm not persuaded because of all the promises that were made to the residents in the past.
Joe Cochran and I went on TV together, and it was like, I refused to believe that this was going to take place. Even if all of this took place, and they did make everything wonderful and beautiful and fantastic, would there be a place for me? Or would they find a way to gradually get rid of the tenants?
What's your answer to that, Mr. Corcoran?
If we were to build this place and the majority of the residents of Columbia Point were to move out, I would consider that we had been a colossal failure if that happened. If the buildings look great and they're not for the people that live there, we will have failed, and we're not going to fail.
Joe Cochran said he would they would make a believer out of me. And I just felt that there was no way they were going to change me over into thinking this was all being done for me. I just refused to believe it. If you do it a building at a time,
but believe it she did.
and you'll have to have
Within
that
4 months of her
before,
appearance on television, Dorothy Harris had changed from a skeptic to an active supporter and member of the Tenants Task Force.
After a period of weeks of talking and listening, and it began to sound better, it began to look better, and then I began to feel that, you know, this might be it. You know, maybe they are what they say they are, and they're gonna do it for us. And they put a lot of time and effort into the things they do. The decisions that they make aren't made overnight. We think about it, talk about it, they let you go home and sleep about it before they decide as a group what's going to happen.
What's the hardest problem that you faced here?
Drugs.
Drugs, without question. Drugs is now more than when I did other jobs. Drugs is a much more pervasive issue. And once again, the only way that gets turned around is when the people say they've had enough. And that's what's happening here now.
For years, open drug dealing could be seen on any street corner of Columbia Point. It took a strong determination by the residents to put an end to it.
The residents themselves quickly identified the main drug dealer. We had the residents working closely with the police department, putting pressure on the police department, identifying where he was, when he was here, having security get him in a number of ways, just really making it so difficult for him here in this community that he had to look for business elsewhere. It just wasn't worth his while to operate out of here.
Yeah, I've got the agenda.
Through the concerted efforts of the partnership and HOU, drug dealing at Columbia Point was no longer tolerated. But now HOU turned its attention to a different problem: how to help those tenants who were suffering from drug addiction. Betty Quarles is a resident of Columbia Point. She is also an HOU outreach worker. Recently, she has had success with helping a young resident complete a drug rehab program.
I went to check up to see if the kids were in school and how she was doing, and so we sit there and we start talking. And I said to her, I said, I know me and you have talked before about the problem that you had, and you said you could do it by yourself. I said, but it seems like you can, and she said no. So I said to her, I said, well, how would you feel about going into a program?
When I went in there, we had meetings and we talked, and I expressed my feelings about how I ended up on drugs and what it did to me and how it made me neglect my kids and stuff. I mostly call every day, almost every day, just about every day when I need someone to talk to. And she really helped me out a lot.
It's funny, a lot of places they got playgrounds to play in, these kids don't, you know. This is it. This is the baseball park right here. And I tell you, I never seen anybody flip like these kids. They'll do 2 or 3 flips and then jump off the things and land right on their feet. They need something down here, you know, the kids need something.
For more than 35 years, countless thousands of children grew up in Columbia Point. Like children everywhere, they made the most of their environment. But without a helping hand, their talent and energy hit the hard walls of the project time and time again.
Good job, Roy.
To break the historical patterns, HOU helped to create a number of programs for the Columbia Point children, like this basketball camp at the nearby University of Massachusetts Harbor campus. The long-term success of Harbor Point depended upon its children being able to believe in a different kind of life for themselves. To spur their imaginations, HOU sponsored a poster contest. The assignment? Visualize your future in Harbor Point.
It's going to be wooden. And wood, there's going to be a lot of windows, back doors, a yard.
Like the trees on the top of the buildings, the green, the pink grass. Well, anyway.
It's black, white, black and white person playing together. It's not just going to be all black living, it's going to be mixed. Like you have a white next to a neighbor setting, all black building, all white building.
How's it make you feel?
Good. It's better that way.
At last, in January of 1987, Columbia Point's residents celebrated their first tangible milestone, Harbor Point's groundbreaking.
Today is a day of victory for the perseverance, the continued efforts of the tenants within this community. They've been working for 23 years. Some of their They've been tireless in speaking to us in the Congress, in the Senate, and to the local officials, and their perseverance is going to mean a better quality of life, not just for themselves, but really for future generations.
Hi, darling. How are you? How are you?
All the years of hard work had finally paid off on this very cold day in January.
This is going to be very short. I want a drum roll.
The ceremony today really made me feel very good because it's something that has been coming for a long time. And at one point I felt it was never going to come through. So that today really made a change in my life, and I really feel very positive about what is going to happen now.
Does this make you think it's really going to happen?
Yeah, I look forward to it. They can't stop now. I know, they done started tearing it down.
How do you think it's going to change things around here?
Well, people, the race. It might change the way more of the people act races, out here.
You know, people, different color people, you know.
All living together?
Yeah. Most of the kids won't do the half things they've been doing to the place.
What were the kids doing?
Sort of what they're doing. Tearing things up.
Right on wall.
Yeah, it'll be better.
All right, come this way and I'll show you a beautiful 3-bedroom house.
In June of 1988, the public got its first look at the new Harbor Point apartments.
Oh, wow. Now, this is, it's terrific, especially for, roommates.
The big question, would these new apartments attract people willing to pay market rates to live in what was once known as one of the nation's worst housing projects? The success of the entire mixed-income experiment would now hinge on the leasing of more than 850 apartments to new tenants. From the beginning, the indications were promising.
The main reason is the location and the value of the product. Here you have the beach right out here and the wonderful things they're going to do. You have pool, tennis courts, shuffleboard courts. People like that.
The success of a mixed-income community rests on the fact that all residents are treated equally, that there is no distinction between incomes. At Harbor Point, the Columbia Point residents would be given the opportunity to choose their own apartments.
4 bedrooms, 2 on this floor with a full bath, 2 on the upper floor with a full bath.
This is it. Yeah.
Okay, put it down. It's in your name. Great, congratulations. It's all yours.
I don't know if you got
Springtime 1990. The Harbor Point redevelopment is a reality. The longtime Columbia Point residents have moved into their new apartments, and the market rate units have rented up on schedule. The project that once scarred this peninsula for so long is gone. The task force's role is now more important than ever. It now represents all the residents, both old and new. A community is the cooperation of its people, and already there's been a very good sign. In the new development's first election, 2 new tenants sought and won seats on the Harbor Point Task Force. Jack Greco was one of them.
The key to making this place swim or sink is going to be the people that live here. And moving here and finding the mix in the Columbia Point and new tenants and subsidized tenants and market rate tenants and black and white and on, that if this place is going to work, which I really believe it will, that the tenants have to make it work.
got a nice view.
Oh,
You got a nice view from all these windows up here.
When I hear people say, boy, you're lucky that this is happening to you, I say, yes, maybe we are, but we deserve it. You know, those are my words, we deserve it, because people have stuck it out, they've fought for it, and now they have it.
Harbor Point is an emerging mixed-income community, a new Boston neighborhood. The partnership between the residents and the developers continues to grow and face new challenges. The dream and commitment that transformed this once desolate point of land was just the beginning. A beginning that could inspire other struggling communities looking for a better future.